Hey, good afternoon to you. It is now 4:06 News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up this hour, KT McFarland will join us, former U.S. Deputy National Security Advisor. We'll talk to her about the incoming National Security Advisor now, Mike Walz, joining the incoming Trump administration. And then David Arsanier is here to talk about the rise of Blue Anon, all those left-wing conspiracy theorists running free in America. What are we going to do about them? David will talk about that at 5. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Tom Homan set to become the Border Czar.
We have seen one estimate that says it would cost $88 billion to deport 1 million people a year.
I don't know if that's accurate or not.
Is that what American taxpayers should expect?
What price do you put on national security? Is that worth it?
Is there a way to carry out mass deportation without separating families?
Of course there is. Families can be deported together.
Families could be deported together. This is common sense stuff. What aren't you understanding about this? That's Tom Homan. He is former acting director of U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. He's also a visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation right now, soon to become the Border Czar in the incoming Trump administration. And here to discuss that and so much more is Kevin Roberts, the president of the Heritage Foundation, joins us now. Kevin, good to have you back with us, sir.
Vince, it's always great to join you. And I just have to say, Tom Homan needs to do media training for conservative policymakers too, right?
Yeah, big time. How about just tell the truth in a blunt way and embarrass the interviewer by just being awesome? He's really good. So, Kevin, first and foremost, before I get to Tom Homan, how elated are you about the result from last week?
Well, I'm elated, not just for the obvious reasons. We needed the political win, those of us who care about the American future. But secondly, I think this is the beginning of a golden era of conservative policy and governance if, in fact, we're able to harness this popular will and impose it on the uniparty in Washington.
Yeah, it's going to be a very big deal. And it has the makings of already turning out really well. I'm liking some of the hires. Tom Homan is among the people I'm really excited about because he has a proven track record of really caring about this issue and being good at dealing with it. That is America's borders. Tell me your thoughts on Tom Homan and the selection to become the Border Czar.
Even if I were not friends with Tom Homan, even if he were not a colleague at Heritage, I would say the following. When you realize that in order to restore the rule of law at the southern border, you have to pay equal attention to restoring the rule of law in the interior of the country, something I learned from Tom several years ago, you realize there's really only one person who understands that, who has done it, who has President Trump's trust, and who also, evidenced by his pushback on that 60 Minutes reporter, has the media ability to explain this in a way that Americans want to have it explained. They don't want Washington speak. They don't want wonky academic speak. They want it spoken as their local sheriff. And obviously Tom is someone who kind of fits the bill as well. In other words, it's the lesson of the election, which is that Americans want to wake up in a normal country. And someone like Tom in particular, is so common sense. He's so normal. He's like your next door neighbor.
Yes.
You go call if your house is on fire, or if you need anything, he'd give you the shirt off his back. That, I think, is a really underappreciated aspect of Tom's leadership, in addition to, obviously, his leadership experience in that particular policy area.
And he has an excellent understanding of the law. He runs circles not only around reporters, but around members of Congress. All of his congressional testimony has been fabulous as he teaches AOC how the law works. And he's got this sort of blunt, masculine candor, which is really appealing. And I love that he's going to be in this role. So my guess is, and the reason for that is, my guess is that he's going to play a large role in getting this particular problem under control very quickly, Kevin.
I think he's such a powerful hire, Vince, that you will see a decrease in attempted border crossings even before Inauguration Day. Such a big part of this is trying to inspire self-deportation. There's been a lot of talk through the election cycle about how expensive it would be. Obviously, the reporter asked that question. It's actually going to be less expensive than we think if someone like Tom working for someone like President Trump, both of whom are dead serious about returning people back to their home countries. Part of it is sending the signal to the cartels, to the government south of the border who are complicit in this, that the status quo, as it's been the last 3.5 years, is over. And so I actually think we're going to see, not even a year into the administration, 3 or 6 months into the administration, great success at reducing the numbers.
Yeah, I really hope so. Anyway, so I'm happy about him. I know you are too. Let me move on to the state of the Senate leadership race. If there's a lesson from Trump's reelection with this big mandate that he's received, it's that the American people are tired of Washington ignoring them. And they're saying, wait a second, you're going to pay attention to us. And this week, the Republican leadership race is going on in the United States Senate, where it looks like they'll have 53 seats come January. And there are 3 men who have thrown their hat in the ring to become the next Republican leader, replacing Mitch McConnell in the role. Those are John Thune, John Cornyn, and Rick Scott. That vote is supposed to take place tomorrow with a secret ballot. And there are a number of senators who have already made statements anonymously to the media who are annoyed that the public is even paying attention to this vote and essentially sending the signal that we need to butt out of it. It's not our business. What do you think about this battle, and how should it end up, Kevin?
I think the senators or staffers saying that must not have been paying attention the last 7 days, because one of the lessons from the election isn't just that Trump and Vance won, but that the American people are saying that business as usual in Washington has to come to an end. And so, as you know, on Sunday I did something we don't usually do at Heritage, which is endorse Senator Scott for majority leader. We usually stay out of those races out of respect to the members to handle their own affairs. But we thought in this instance, particularly considering that Heritage and Heritage Action are so in touch with the grassroots, that they needed to know that something's got to change. And so we're obviously pulling for Senator Scott. If, however, either Senator Thune or my friend from my Texas days, Senator Cornyn, prevails in that election, then whoever wins that needs to understand that Mitch McConnell's days of running the Senate and running Capitol Hill and running the Uniparty are over. That is the lesson of this election. Business as usual must come to an end, even if Senator Scott doesn't win that election.
I was looking at the Heritage Action website this weekend just to kind of get an assessment of where these guys stand in the eyes of Heritage Action, which keeps a conservative scorecard on them. And John Cornyn has a 35% score. John Thune has a 37% score. And Rick Scott comes out at 92%. In other words, adherence to conservative principles as defined by Heritage Action. That's a pretty big difference between those 3.
It's remarkable. And, I lead a think tank, so I like data. The numbers don't lie. And looking ahead, looking forward, it's really important for all members of the Senate who are Republicans to understand. Obviously, there's room for differences of opinion on certain bills. What there isn't room for is telling the American electorate you're going to do one thing, but then hide yourselves behind some fancy multi-million-dollar K Street funded marketing campaign that you've actually put lipstick on a pig for. That's the kind of thing that's revealed by those numbers. It's also the kind of thing, regardless of how the election goes, that Heritage and Heritage Action will be paying attention to, because it is very obvious that Trump and Vance have a mandate to lead, and we're going to be part of making sure that happens on Capitol Hill.
I saw CPAC posted this week, too, that they compared the 3 of them, and they talked about a piece of legislation that would have reprioritized $26 billion in foreign aid instead to domestic infrastructure projects. Rick Scott was a yes on that vote. John Thune was a no, and John Cornyn was a no. And that's one example, but it's just a good sort of way to take their temperature on, okay, which guy is going to be America first? Who's going to be on board with this agenda? And obviously, look, all of them are saying right now, I'm on board with Trump. I'm going to help Trump achieve this agenda. But Trump's experience in Washington, Kevin Roberts, is he's dealt with a lot of people, especially within his own party, who made all sorts of very big promises to him about how they were going to, deliver, and then they failed in the end. And that really left President Trump with a bad taste in his mouth.
Well, and with good reason. And there has to be real accountability. I will say, Vince, I don't think there's a better example than the one you mentioned of an issue that's so telling about where members of the United States Senate stand. This issue of sending foreign aid or even military aid to Ukraine, as you and I have talked about several times over the last few years, is so telling, particularly when it comes at the expense of our own national security, our own domestic rule of law. And the fact is, it isn't just that too many Republican senators still vote the wrong way on that. It's that they tell us that sending all that foreign aid, sending the non-military, military aid to Ukraine is somehow going to keep America safer. They don't even want to facilitate the conversation on the Senate floor. You see, as you know, one of the things I do for a living is read between the lines. This is also not just about the Trump-Vance agenda, but about updating the Senate rules and the conference rules so that there can actually be amendments allowed on the floor. And look, if amendments are allowed on the floor and democracy wins, math rules the day, and the amendment author doesn't get his or her way, so be it. But there ought to be, in what is purported to be the finest legislative body since ancient Rome, an amendment process and a transparent rules process, and dare I say, a public voting process that honors the principles of the founding of this republic. Until and unless that happens, we at Heritage and Heritage Action are not going to be quiet.
Okay, Kevin, finally, just in your understanding of Washington, what is going on behind the scenes that's even making this a contest? Why isn't Rick Scott just running away with it? Does this come down to money for Senate campaigns and who controls it and who receives it? Is it just like horse trading we're seeing going on right now?
It's mostly the McConnell money machine and the grotesque financial apparatus that is K Street. The good news is that with each election cycle, there is a larger percentage of senators in the Republican conference who are aligned with a truly conservative America First agenda. Yeah. And so by the end of this decade, this is going to be really good. It's just we have the opportunity right now to accelerate that at the same time that we have a slim majority in the House and obviously have not just the executive branch, but two tremendous leaders in Trump and Vance who are willing to take some political risk to accelerate this revitalization of the American dream. It's the Senate that is the anchor on this right now.
All right. Kevin Roberts is the president of the Heritage Foundation. And Kevin, you've got a brand new book out as well called Dawn's Early Light, Taking Back Washington to Save America. Tell us about the book. What did you set out to achieve here?
Well, what I set out to achieve is to put a policy solution, a set of plans that actually solve so much of what you and I are talking about, but to even take a broader view than just being focused on Washington and to understand that if, in fact, in our lifetimes, Vince, we're going to live out that inspiration that comes from Francis Scott Key's phrase, Dawn's Early Light, that we, in fact, can do that if we remember that in our local communities, in our states, we need to fight just as hard. We need to spend just as much time paying attention to local politics and state politics as you do such a good job of every day on your show. All of those are important, federal, state, and local. The most important is that we regenerate our institutions, our local schools, our colleges and universities, our civic associations. If we do that, along with the good news that's happening in Washington, I think that America's best days may yet be ahead.
An optimistic message. Dawn's Early Light. I love the title, and I love our guest, Kevin Roberts. Thank you very much from the Heritage Foundation. Good to talk to you as always, sir. Don't miss the Chris Plant Show. Wonderful guy. The Wall Street Journal has a piece out right now, just in the last hour now, actually. Headline, Trump draft executive order would create board to purge generals. Uh-oh. Dateline Washington, the Trump transition team is considering a draft executive order that establishes a, quote, warrior board of retired senior military personnel with the power to review 3- and 4-star officers and to recommend removals of any deemed unfit for leadership. If Donald Trump approves the order, it could fast-track the removal of generals and admirals found to be, quote, lacking in requisite leadership qualities, according to a draft order reviewed by the Wall Street Journal. That is hilarious. And by the way, well needed. And by the way, well within the right of the President of the United States. I'm seeing people already freaking out on the internet over this. People are freaking out on the internet? Yeah, they're freaking out on the internet right now. I see, let me see, one guy sharing some of the news here online, Yashar Ali saying that if Donald Trump approves the order, it could fast-track the removal of generals and admirals, as I mentioned. But it could also create a chilling effect on top military officers, given the president-elect's past vow to fire woke generals, as he should. As commander-in-chief, Trump can fire any officer at will, but an outside board whose members he appoints would bypass the Pentagon's regular promotion system. Again, he's the commander-in-chief. Trump can restructure this any way he feels like. So I mentioned earlier this week that he should take a hard look at the top leadership of all of these organizations, and that includes all of the U.S. attorneys, all of the top generals in the military. And according to the Wall Street Journal, again, these are not official pronouncements from the Trump transition teams or President Trump himself on Truth Social. These are leaked things to the Wall Street Journal. And you do have to question who's leaking them, what are their intentions, and could they be President Trump's team intentionally sharing some of this to kind of put some feelers out, see how people react to it. But I'm here to tell you, if that's what it is, positively, reacting very positively today to the idea that you would audit the top leadership of the military in order to make it better. That's the mission. And watch, of course, as the media spin all of this in the days and weeks ahead as Trump is demanding loyalty to him. He's such an authoritarian, and on and on and on. No, he's the guy who was just elected by the American people, asking that the people who work in the government actually fulfill the mission that the American voter expects. He's learned his lessons, and we're seeing the fruits of that right now. Coming up, we'll talk about foreign policy specifically with KT McFarland. A couple of picks publicly announced, others yet to be seen. We'll discuss it all with KT McFarland coming up, former U.S. Deputy National Security Advisor. She joins us next right here on WMAL. Hey, good afternoon to you. It's now 4:35 here at News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, David Harsanyi joins us at the top of the 5 o'clock hour. We talked to him about the left-wing conspiracy theorists, who many of whom work in the legacy news media, who we now know as Blue Anon. David's written the book on the subject. We have a lot to talk about. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. President Trump has selected Florida Republican Congressman Mike Walz to take the reins as the incoming White House National Security Advisor. It's a big pick. What impact will it have on the country? How will Congressman Walz perform in that role? Let's talk to KT McFarland, former U.S. Deputy National Security Advisor and the author of Revolution, Trump, Washington, and We the People. KT, great to have you back with us.
Oh, Vince, it's always good to be with you. Thank you.
What do you make of this pick, and what does it mean for the country?
It's terrific. First of all, I mean, Mike Walz is a highly decorated combat veteran. He's really smart. He's been a policy advisor at the Pentagon and at the White House in previous administrations. He is a MAGA Republican. He came in with Trump. He likes Trump. They get along really well. He's articulate. So I think he's just a brilliant choice. Mm-hmm. The only thing is, this is the hardest job in Washington because you're at the president's side morning, noon, and night. You're up before the president gets up and you brief him, and you go to bed after the president goes to bed and he's talked to you. And the problem is Donald Trump sleeps 4 hours a night. So it's a really hard job to have, and Mike Walz will be terrific. Plus, he has an awesome, terrific wife who's even smarter than he is.
Well, it's a tough job, too, because this is an intelligence community that hasn't exactly been very friendly to President Trump. And here you have a national security advisor coming in who's going to grab the reins. And what kind of problems might he run into in this role?
Well, certainly in the first Trump administration, you're absolutely right. It was the national security community and the entire government, really. The federal bureaucracy, the lifers, the sort of faceless, nameless bureaucrats that you don't hire, you can't fire, who are there forever and look at presidents as just sort of, presidents come, presidents go, we're here forever, we're in charge. And I just keep thinking back to the statement that Colonel Vindman made during the impeachment hearings. So Vindman used to work on the NSC. I tried to get him fired, couldn't fire him. But he said in the impeachment hearings that one of the problems that why Donald Trump should be impeached is because Donald Trump his policies were against the agreed upon interagency policy for Ukraine. That said it all.
In other words, the sitting president of the United States has no role in this. He should butt out. We have an interagency process, don't you see?
Well, and not only is it undemocratic, right? The people of the United States elect the president of the United States to make those decisions, But they've also gotten everything wrong. I mean, they were wrong about the forever wars. They were wrong about Israel and the Middle East. They were wrong about Ukraine. They were wrong about energy in Europe. They were wrong about China. They were wrong about, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya. And so not only are these people undemocratic and have seized power away from the American people, but they're actually not very good at it.
Yep. The other thing, having talked to Congressman Walz a lot through the years, because we've had him on the show so many times, and we talked quite a bit about Ukraine and the role that the United States has been playing there. And one of the things that Congressman Walz would routinely say, especially as time went on, is we need an accounting of how Ukraine is spending all of this. And this is basically stretched on into infinity. And he became very, I would say, very critical of what was happening in Ukraine and the effect it was having on Americans and all of the loss of Ukrainian lives. So he's a guy on that issue who seems to be in the same place that President Trump and J.D. Vance are in.
Which is why he was selected for that job. It's not just we need an accounting of where all the money goes. Now, remember, before the Ukraine war, Ukraine was considered one of the most corrupt countries in the world. Is it still? We don't know. The second point is, but what's the plan? What's the plan? I mean, other than we know Russia's bad, we know Russia is the aggressor, we know Russia shouldn't be rewarded.
Right.
But then you have to then say, well, okay, so how do you defeat Russia? And there was never a plan. It was just spend more money, give us some more stuff, but never a plan to win, just a plan to kind of keep it going. And that's the definition of a forever war. I mean, I don't think it's an accident that we pull out of Afghanistan, we leave all the trillions of dollars of equipment behind, and then within a few months, there's a new forever war going on in Ukraine.
And that war has resulted in a lot of death. Some estimates say it's above 1 million people who've been killed between Russia and Ukraine with no obvious end in sight. I know President Trump really wants to bring it to a conclusion.
The great thing about President Trump is that he doesn't like wars. He doesn't want to have to fight wars. He doesn't want to have to give in. But on the other hand, he's like Reagan. You have a strong defense, so you don't have to use it. And when President Trump talks about Ukraine, he says, wouldn't it be better if they just settled and stopped all the killing? I mean, I look at it, and this is me talking, not President Trump, not Mike Walz. But if Ukraine is slowly, grindingly losing a war of attrition, which it is, even the Pentagon says that they're losing this war of attrition slowly, if you can't win the war, Ukraine, how do you win the peace? Maybe you win the peace by once the fighting stops, what will happen? Well, if you play the long game, countries and companies will send $1 trillion in to rebuild Ukraine. Within a few years' time, Ukraine will be fully integrated into the Western economy. Remember, it's got an educated population. It's got enormous natural resources, mineral resources, agricultural resources. So Ukraine, a few years after the fighting stops, is a vibrant country. Where's Russia 5 years after the fighting stops? Well, nobody's going to rush in to rebuild Russia. Their economy won't be very good because Donald Trump will have lowered the price of energy through American energy dominance.
Yeah.
And so Russia's going to be 5 years after the fighting stops. Russia's almost a third world country, whereas Ukraine will be it'll be a vital part of Europe.
And you already have Europe talking about buying more natural gas from the United States instead of Russia, which is crazy to me that we're even at that point in the conversation, instead of Russia. So Europe has been funding Russia's war while feeling antagonized by Putin at the same time. So it's just crazy. Let me move on to Iran, because we've seen all these reports of the attempts by the Iranians to assassinate President Trump, over and over and over again. And now I'm seeing reports that from the New York Times that the Iranians, having failed to assassinate him, they couldn't whack him, so now they want to work with him. Now they're plotting. Okay, how do we just have to work with this guy as he comes in? What's going on with the Iranians?
If you're the mullahs, and if you kind of look at the layout, they're very practical people. Remember, Iran, the Persians invented chess. They're very good at playing chess. And if you look around, you think, okay, Hezbollah has been diminished. It's been demolished, decapitated. Hamas is finished. And the way that Israel killed and the senior leadership of Hezbollah and Hamas was mostly by tracking them on their cell phones. So if you're the senior mullahs of Iran and you've just seen a senior Hezbollah official be killed just a few blocks down the road from where you live, you got to be a little nervous. And now that President Trump is coming in, and President Trump has always been very pro-Israel, and he's always been anti-Iran. He slapped sanctions on Iran, President Trump has said then, and he continues to say, that the way you deal with Iran is you bankrupt them. Iran needs to sell oil at a high price or it doesn't have anything. So Biden comes in. He immediately makes sure that the price of oil goes way up because of Biden's energy policy. So Iran is rich because it sells oil. And then he dropped it, didn't enforce the sanctions. And then he gave Iran millions of dollars. So Iran is probably, some estimates are, over $100 billion richer thanks to Joe Biden than they would have been if Donald Trump had remained president.
Yes.
So if Iran is looking at this equation, they've got to think, yikes, we've got to worry about our own people right now, whether our own people are going to keep us in power if we have an economy that is sputtering.
And it's China that's been keeping Iran alive. 90% of their oil exports go to China. So you've got this.
China.
You've got this arrangement where China is keeping the Iranian terror threat funded in the Middle East. And so much of this goes right back to the answer that you pointed out to a moment ago about Russia. It's American energy. If we can get American energy stimulated to unseen levels, that's going to start to resolve a lot of this.
It's American energy is the answer to everything. It's the answer to an American economic growth and American economic revitalization. But it really has a big national security impact. We now realize we have enough oil and natural gas from shale that we can power the world for hundreds of years ourselves. We don't need Russia. We don't need Saudi. We don't need any of those countries. We can power the world cheaper, safer, cleaner than any other country can. And so what does that do? It puts the United States in an extraordinary position of leverage over China, leverage over Russia, leverage over Iran. So if you're Iran, and Iran continues to, every about 8 years, there's a popular uprising of the people of Iran against the mullahs and the government of Iran, they've got to start worrying about, if Donald Trump is going to drive the price of energy down, we're not going to be able to have the money for our terrorist groups, for our proxy wars, for our nuclear program. Yeah. We better find a way to settle with Donald Trump.
The way the media describe it, they say that world leaders are quaking in their boots that Donald Trump is coming back into office, that they're so upset about this. The global community is so upset about this. But one thing I've noticed is, first of all, it looks like every single world leader is making the pilgrimage or the phone call to President Trump right now. They all want to talk to him. He talked to Vladimir Zelensky and Vladimir Putin within the last week. Clearly, they want to have conversations with him. We're looking at the Mexican president, Claudia Sheinbaum, the new Mexican president. She's already slowing down some of the waves of humanity who are trying to head north because she doesn't want tariffs slapped on her country. President Trump just threatened to do that recently. And then you've got the Western Europeans saying they may take some natural gas from the United States now and get away from Russia. It seems like the world community is very instantly adhering to a future that has Donald Trump as president.
Well, look, in the last couple of days, China has come out and said, we want really peaceful relations with the United States. Putin has said we want to settle the Ukraine war. Hamas has even said they wanted to settle the war. Qatar, which is where we keep the U.S. Fifth Fleet, is home ported, and which has welcomed the senior Hamas leaders sitting poolside at the Four Seasons Hotel, the political leaders. Qatar has now said, well, we don't want those guys anymore. They're kicking them out. So everybody is all of a sudden, Donald Trump hasn't lifted one finger. And all of a sudden, everybody is saying, we want to make nice. We want a good relationship. So I think they all understand that the writing is on the wall, that the good old days of exploiting the United States and forever wars are coming to an end. Okay. Well, it's encouraging to see a lot of these picks coming through. Happy to see that. I'm hoping, KT, that things calm down. Do you think things calm down in the first year of an incoming Trump administration on the global stage? I think what will happen is he'll very quickly, because remember, I'm a New Yorker, and Donald Trump has been known in New York as one of the great negotiators, one of the great deal guys of all time. And he'll find a way to end that Ukraine war very quickly. He'll find a way to have better relations with our Europeans because he's going to convince them that it's in their best interest to increase their defense spending towards our common defense. And as Donald Trump adopts his new energy policy, drill baby drill, he calls it, the Russians and the Iranians will realize they cannot continue to fight. They cannot continue to exploit their own people. They've got to figure out a way of stopping these wars and having a relationship with the United States, mostly because they can't afford to do otherwise. KT McFarland, as always, such a pleasure to have you on and good to talk to you today. Thank you so much. Thank you, Vince.
That's KT McFarland, former U.S. Deputy National Security Advisor and the author of Revolution, Trump, Washington, and We the People. Now, let's see here. We've got a lot of great calls coming in. I'd like to bring in Mike from Falls Church on line 5. Mike, good afternoon, sir. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show. Hello.
It's a pleasure to listen to you. And I'm calling in reference to Trump reviewing the upper leadership of the military and potentially clearing out some generals. I'm seeing, as you mentioned, all the brouhaha coming up on online.
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, now Obama went through the military and cleaned out a lot of more conservative generals who did not agree with his worldview or his idea of where the military should be. I don't recall any brouhaha about that, and I would not expect that to be brought up when they critique Trump on it. I'm also wondering if it's possible all these generals who were removed, if they are available or possibly can be reinstated.
You mean the conservative generals removed in the Obama era is what you're referencing? Yeah,
Exactly.
and also, like, as you talk about conservatives who've been purged, a more recent and at least fresh in my mind event was just people who said, no, I'm not getting the vaccine, and who were chased out of the United States military. You had chaplains who said, I'm not doing it. I've got a religious objection to it, and they were chased out of the United States military. And so that whole vaccine episode under Joe Biden, which is an extension, as you point out, of the Obama era, was really about a political sorting of the United States military, forcing people out who weren't adherers to the regime and forcing them to do things that weren't about improving military readiness. Look, I understand following a lawful order from the President of the United States. I get all that. But that wasn't about improving the lethality of the military or the health of the military. That was purely a cruel effort to filter the military and to remove the kinds of people that we very much want serving.
Exactly, and perhaps erroneously, but I was assuming that those would have the option of returning to the military when Trump comes in. I just figured that would be something that would be a no-brainer for him.
Yeah. This is a big moment. We'll see. I think if President Trump can restore the military to its greatness, that's going to be a really big deal. And I know for so long, so many of us watched the American military, and we saw an institution that had resisted all of the idiocies of the left that had corrupted so many things around us. And we kept looking at the military. We're like, look at that, the last bastion of normalcy. And the left even got its tentacles in there. And this is a big task. And if President Trump can fix things, I know a lot of veterans are going to be very, very happy to see that happen. Mike, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, let's go to John calling in from Berryville now on line 9. Hello, John. You are on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince.
Hey,
one thing I wanted to bring up was the fact that during the first Trump administration, you had Trump saying, get U.S. forces out of Syria, and it was the U.S. officials and the general officers that actually kept us there and hid that from Trump. And now we're, going into a new Trump administration, and again he's saying get our soldiers out of Syria. So it'd be interesting to see if that actually happens.
Yes.
But it's good news that he's actually looking to clean house.
Yeah, you have a good memory, John. Yeah, that's exactly right. Officials were hiding that information from President Trump because he had ordered the troops out of Syria, so they kept hidden the fact that they actually were keeping troops there, straight up disobeying a lawful order, ignoring the constitutional arrangement here in the United States, the constitutional order, and ignoring the will of the American people. And that's the kind of thing that I'm pretty sure you should be, court-martialed for, that you should be charged for if you're deceiving the American people, the President of the United States. But they did it, and then they bragged about it in the media. Don't you worry, we kept troops in Syria. Thank you, John, for reminding us about the awfulness that the deep state, if you want to call it that, is guilty of, and it has been guilty of. Coming up, David Harsanyi will talk to us about all those conspiracy theorists on the left. There's a lot of them. So many, they even have a name for it. It's called Blue Anon. David joins us next.